B2B is far ahead because like every customer journey, every workflow in B2B is way more complex than in B2C. B2B figured out the models around how to retaining customers, how to approach customers in a tailored approach way earlier. So whatever they come up with online solutions is very advanced compared to what we have achieved in B2C. In B2C, if we are honest about it, and it's true for Amazon and Zalando and Walmart, there's no tailor-made customer journeys. It's really everybody's like seeing the same, getting the same discounts, getting the same recommended products, and all the promises our industry made, especially in B2C. You know, you're starting at this website and you're only getting the brands you want for the price you only can see and achieve with your individual discounts. Never happened.
So Alex, I'd love to hear first just kind of your journey. I know you've been in the industry for quite a few years, a couple of decades, and especially us old guys in the industry, it's interesting to kind of hear the path that you took to Spryker and kind of the path that you came into B2B e-commerce as well.
Yeah, Justin, thanks for the invitation. It's funny that you're saying that it's decades now in the industry. It's true for me. It's like 2 decades. I'm working in this industry actually for 20 years, and 20 years ago when we started, and we were like the young guys and girls who said, okay, you know, the old stubborn white male usually working in our industry, not able to change from mail order or whatever into like e-commerce, we will disrupt them. And now I'm wondering, now we are the old white guys or girls. So who is sitting where and like laughing about us and saying, okay, what Alex and Justin are doing, that's so outdated. Let's do like TikTok B2B sales. No, so I started actually 20 years ago when I in retail at a big mail order company called Otto Group. They are the owner of Crate & Barrel in the US. So that might be a known brand there. And I was lucky because I was starting like in e-commerce when e-commerce was still not seen as a dominating industry. It was, and I had a very average kind of result in the university exam. So I had to choose retail. No investment banking, no consultancy was like available for me with this test set. And then when we started, it became really clear that there's like a couple of like new business models that are trying to like reinvent how people are buying and selling, especially in B2C. And this actually was also the angle where I started in this kind of industry. But over time, I kind of realized, okay, B2B is far ahead because like every customer journey, every workflow in B2B is way more complex than in B2C. B2B figured out the models around how to retaining customers, how to approach customers in a tailored approach way earlier. So whatever they come up with online solutions is very advanced compared to what we have achieved in B2C. In B2C, if we are honest about it, and it's true for Amazon and Zalando and Walmart, there's no tailor-made customer journeys. It's really everybody's like seeing the same, getting the same discounts, getting the same recommended products, and all the promises our industry made, especially in B2C. You know, you're starting at this website and you're only getting the brands you want for the price you only can see and achieve with your individual discounts. Never happened. It's happening now more with Temu and Shein, which are having a tough time now in the US, but actually B2C under-delivered promise-wise in e-commerce, and B2B was like the way more interesting journey, or became the more interesting journey for me over time. That is because the projects we did even before Spryker and B2B were more interesting. In the B2C project, it was all about how to handle Amazon, how to scale Google Ads. In B2B projects, it was way more around the product, the customer journey, real solving a problem, right? In the area I live in Germany, around DACH, we have very, very strong manufacturing competence, very, very strong complex B2B journeys that can be helped. And so over time, when we started Spryker more or less 10 years ago, also the Spryker journey adapted more to B2B challenges. So we kind of solved, we say, sophisticated journeys. Others say it's complex journeys, and we can solve them better than anybody else. And that was my way into B2B. It all started with B2C, and I thought B2C was way ahead. But over time, I've learned that's not true. And now most B2C journeys are lagging behind. So kind of e-commerce B2C e-commerce is still the same like it was in 2012. Maybe one or two new payment methods are in there. But if you're like opening up a website today, people cannot tell if this is like a screenshot from 2012 or 2022.
That's so true. What do you think are the, like when you talk about sophisticated commerce, like in the B2B world, give me some practical applications of what that means.
Yeah. So obviously, if you're starting like an RFP process with B2B companies, like it's usually not about like one customer journey. It's like many different like customer cohorts with like dozens of different customer journey. So that's like on the customer journey side, that's one thing. It's usually not about like ready-made products that are like in a warehouse. It's more make to order kind of stuff, request for quote processes where like different providers need to be connected, where you have to come up with a price through a very sophisticated process of like finding out, is the material available, is the production capacity available, what is the logistics cost for this specific item for this specific customer. And that's what we're seeing like in B2B, and usually you don't see this in B2C projects. That's what I find interesting, because in B2B projects, you definitely need very strong product managers that understand the problems of specific customer cohorts and say, okay, is a pricing difference in logistic costs? Is it something the customer is interested in, or is the customer not so price sensitive because he anyway puts like the price on top at a certain invoice for his customers? So we should like optimize for another process. And this level of insight you usually don't find in B2C companies.
You have a kind of a unique perspective, a global perspective. About half of our audience is global, and half the audience is US, half the audience is global. We found in the US that kind of the biggest challenge is executive buy-in. The company's executives actually believing that digital is a strategic advantage inside their company. Do you see the same challenges like in DACH, and earlier we were talking about Dubai and other areas?
We see the same challenges. So obviously in the US and like in Europe, we have like a way more sophisticated market, because like many of those decision makers today, CIOs usually or CMOs, grew up with commerce. It was different like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, when you had to convince them of like commerce or digital commerce is like more advanced than mail order commerce. We don't see this kind of talent level in other regions. In some APAC regions, we see them. In the MENA region, especially like Dubai, Saudi, Qatar, Egypt, we don't see this because there was no developed commerce industry. So usually you don't have executives with kind of a commerce history or like with digital commerce history. So there the explanations and presentations are very different from what we are using in the US and Europe. But what's interesting now is that over the last like 15 years, digitalization was kind of optional. You could do it or not. And then company A is doing it, Grainger is doing it, but see, their margins are not so much better. So I was right, Alex. So I stuck with like the mail order catalog kind of thing. And obviously it was kind of one direction decision, right? So there was like different degrees of digitization, but like you kind of worked with a similar value chain. Now, where we're heading now with AI and some other stuff, it's not optional anymore. It's like really mandatory. If you're not doing it within the next like 5 to 10 years, and you have to start with like basic digitization to get actually to the level where you can apply AI, you're out of the business. And this is something those decision makers are starting to understand, because they're seeing how everything is disrupted by AI around them. And when they're starting to look into AI use cases, they figure that without this kind of relevant discipline around like building my own data, protecting data, I cannot do anything in AI. And maybe I should have listened to Justin and Alex, who they told me like 10 years ago to build this kind of data set. So this kind of new level of importance is changing the culture, because now we are moving into more FOMO kind of discussions. Before it was kind of optional, and I was like first 10 years in my career, I had the strategy, okay, I will convince like the old Justin. He will learn it. I will show him that it's so much better to go for the digitalization way, and it's so much cheaper along the way, and eventually it's cheaper doing it now instead of like doing it like in 10 years. But over time, I've learned there's no way of convincing like old Justin. If old Justin is saying digitalization is just optional, I don't want to do it, I believe in the mail order way, I just have to wait because either the market is pushing old Justin into that direction, or his working contract expires based on age or whatever, and then somebody will come and then we can do it together. Because like from an agency or vendor perspective, if we need to sell the importance of digitalization in the B2B project and then deliver it and be successful for the result, this opens up so many discussions that you don't want to have, that you cannot control. So we need to work with companies that are 100% on board and that don't need this executive buy-in. And that's actually how I look at it today. There's like, yes, there are many companies where executives are still not buying in, but they will give up anytime soon because it's not the optionality is out of the discussion anymore.
Yeah, I think for the first probably 15 years of my career, it was always about convincing people to come along with me, right? An invitation, and then it moved to a critical survival, like you've got to do this to survive, you know?
Yeah.
And it takes time. It takes so much time to get this right and test and optimize and figure out your customer journeys. I love that. What do you see in the kind of the macroeconomic pressures, especially when you look at kind of the global stage? What are you seeing and hearing from manufacturers and distributors in the market today?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like region by region is super interesting. So 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I started a bit digging into Middle East, especially like Saudi and Dubai. And it was like 2-3 years ago, it was like everybody was like super hyped. And people were moving from Dubai into Riyadh, the capital of like Saudi, and saying, okay, what Dubai achieved, we're achieving now in Saudi. There's so much money, so much opportunities. And now they're running out of money because of like the oil price drop and some other like macroeconomic changes. And many of our agency partners are not getting paid anymore, right? Not particularly for Spryker projects, but there's no money anymore. So like 3 years ago, I would have told you, hey, go to Dubai. It's like definitely an interesting place. Today, I would say 100% avoid this region for the next like 1 or 2 years until the dust settles. The other way around, like it was like similar with the US. So US was like the market, like also for us last 10 years, like a growth market. 50% of all like software licenses are, I think, paid in the US. So it's a huge market. All the investors, all our partners were pushing us, moving in that direction. And like we have like a big team there. Now what we're seeing is like Europe is like developing much better because there's that seems to be the place where money is moving, where people see, okay, some investments can be made that make sense infrastructure-wise, digitalization-wise. Germany will be by far the biggest beneficiary of this development because there are no euro bonds. There's no bonds where you can invest in Europe. You have to decide for a country. Germany is like the biggest country in Europe, so therefore most of the money will come into Europe. I'm pretty sure if like Germany is like taking on another trillion of debt, the market will buy it easily. So what was interesting, I recently, like 2 weeks ago, I've heard the CEO of the biggest like German bank giving a keynote, and he's saying, with a new $500 billion in debt, interest rates for the German bonds went down because the market is believing that more investment is leading like to better Germany. So, and I think this, when the bond market is like starting to swing, and the bond market is a very slow swinging environment. It's not swinging like it's swinging in decades and not in years, not in months. So, but that's an interesting development. So I'm a bit more careful now, being like too bullish on like a certain market as I was in the Middle East region like 3 years ago, or in the US maybe last year, or maybe I could be very optimistic about Europe right now. So lots of stuff can happen within days. I believe like globally that there will be a bit more collaboration between China and Europe because like there's lots of potential. Politically, there's definitely kind of blockade between like China and the US, which I don't see any way to solve it within the last 3 years of Trump. But therefore, I'm a bit more bullish on the European market, especially the DACH market in B2B right now, and a bit more pessimistic on the US and Middle East, and undecided what it means for South America. And South America, let's be honest, that's essentially like Mexico if you put it in the South American bucket, and Brazil. The other markets you can basically
right. How have you experienced kind of the customer journey itself changing? What do you see as kind of the kind of biggest movements in customer journey? Not with manufacturing distributors, but manufacturing distributors, customers themselves.
So what we're seeing within the companies is, so we expect that many of those companies will build pure digital teams that are becoming the masters of the digital B2B user journey, and their own tech teams to start developing. They were slower in adapting it than I expected, but they are there now, and I see a big differentiation between two types of B2B companies. B2B companies that did digital project in the last 5, 6, 7 years, that do have an understanding what a product manager means in a digital way, or what a digital customer journey is, and companies that are starting now. And the companies that do have this kind of teams that in some cases are idling now for last 6 months because of this kind of global recession, they're looking into new projects, new opportunities, new stuff they can do to support revenue growth or to stabilize revenue, versus the other companies are struggling finding these product managers and developers, because most of those B2B companies are located in remote locations, and we have this big demographic shift. So to be very honest, there is not too many 30-year-old digital natives being available to become your next CIO close to Stuttgart. It's a very, very tight market. So there's very, very different times of those stuff. The conversations with multi-company CIOs, so CIOs that have been 3-4 years at a company and then shifted, is a very different one from the ones who are now figuring out how to get a bit more independent from ATG or SAP or Microsoft, and I don't know if they have a chance to catch up, because it's the market is moving too fast.
How do you see? I think the talent problem is actually pretty significant. I think the talent. There's kind of two parts of the talent problem. One is, in the U.S., what you said is very relevant. There's where these companies are at is not where the talent resides.
Yes.
Right? And these companies aren't really built for remote work, so it's kind of a battle between that, right? So even if you get talent, you're not really built for remote work. How do you make that work? The second part of that is that a lot of people struggle with their careers inside of B2B companies. What is your career path? Yeah. CIO is a little easier one to wrap your head around, the progression to CIO. But if you're a director of digital, what is your career path? Both by where you live, your geography, and your position within the company. Have you seen similar?
Yeah. So on the talent pool, I think the situation in Europe is worse than in the US. There's a couple of countries that do have managed this demographic shift a bit better. The US is one, Turkey is one, India is one, and then some of the African countries, obviously. Brazil is also still young. In Germany alone, we are losing 500,000 workers net per year. So
wow.
No chance to replace them with immigrants, no chance to increase birth rates. That's a lot. That means essentially that you won't find anybody doing blue-collar labor jobs for entry wages, for entry salaries, right? So in 2 or 3 years, you don't find anybody to open up your retail store at 6 a.m. in the morning so somebody could buy some toothpaste. It's not possible. There's just no people anymore. Not even immigrants will do that. We need them for higher paid jobs. And we have a very still immigrant positive kind of agenda here. And so that's one thing, the one perspective. The second perspective is, I'm not sure if I was a digital director, if I would aim for CIO anymore, because obviously the next big job in line is CAIO, the AI officer, right? Which is 10 times more complex, 10 times more budget than the CIO. The CIO kind of try to make things work, to get all the data out of SAP or Microsoft and to establish like a couple of connections to like the new vendors. But he still stayed in lane. He still worked with the standard value chain of the company. The CIO, or I don't know how to pronounce it.
I like it. CIO sounds good.
He's like working like in 2 dimensions. He's working like on a new value chain because like everything is changing, plus like this whole new digital stuff, which is very different. Like doing AI strategy work is very different from doing a PIM project. It's super, super, super different. So as a digital director, I would rather aim for this. And third perspective is the demand in these companies, even the remote ones that are like located somewhere in Montana, it's not option anymore. They have to find a way to hire those people. And there's companies with a very, very good offering, whatever it is. Could be a retail company, could be a manufacturing company, could be a parts company where there's no easy replacement from China or India or Mexico. So, and in those companies, there's budget. There's hopefully like young enough and clever leadership. Those I would pick from a digital director's perspective and try to make it work. And maybe you have to fly there like 2 days. And it's easy to say for European perspective because our longest destination travel time is like 2 hours, and then we're in Madrid, and the other 2 hours is in Helsinki, but like it's a bit longer in the US. But these are like the 3 things I would have in mind there. It's definitely a market where we are moving, which is like for the top talent who really knows the stuff. It's a sensational market for, let's say, mid-market employees that usually were like the project managers in the PIM project, right? It's a horrific market because there's not like too much value they can add in these new times.
Yeah, I like that. I think another part of that is there's something about like in the e-commerce world, this B2B world is just so unsexy. It's so not sexy. And there's something about talent that doesn't.
There's nothing more sexy than big machinery and manufacturing stuff.
I agree. I am 100. You and I are on the same page. With your typical e-commerce talent, or digital talent, or strategy talent, they don't see that the same. Like if you're in supply chain, B2B becomes the thing, right? It's the epitome, it's the pinnacle of your career. In digital, sometimes there's a perception of that. And so often it's difficult to get talent just even outside of budget and strategy, just because you're a manufacturer distributor making, widgets or something like that. It's a difficult thing to do. How do you see companies themselves solving some of these larger challenges?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think it starts like from the top. So the C-level must understand what's going on and that there are like new customer journeys. So if we like dial back a bit, like 15 years ago, we would have started like e-commerce projects for B2B companies as side projects. Okay, let's solve a certain issue in a certain sub-market where there's no headwinds, where's no people arguing against it, and then let's open up the online store in Austria. That's like usually the stuff from a German perspective. You would go to Austria, smaller market, and then we could test it out, right? And then let's see if there's some tractions on this kind of project, then we can bring it back into the headquarter kind of thing. And I think the same happened in the US. I don't think you have time for this strategy anymore. So you have to change, you have to start like changing stuff in your core value chain, because like changes are so fast now that you cannot adapt learning from like a 2 years remote market. We had some artificial ingredients built in there. No field force, for example, no existing B2B relationships. And that's tough, because now as a B2B CIO or CO, you have to really make like tough decisions. You have to make decisions where maybe a supplier will call you next day and tell you, okay, I don't want to work with you anymore because you're selling now directly. And this is something we've always told you that you should not do it. And it's kind of tough decision time right now. And I think it's a good time to do this maybe in a time where the market is struggling because all the suppliers, all your partners have to figure out anyway what's going on the next like 2 years. It's definitely tougher if you do it in a market which is like growing strong anyway. Then everybody believes he has the right to call the CEO and yell at him. But this is changing now. It's tougher. I started my career also as a consultant, and it was rather easy to come up with a couple of proposals and okay, let's do proposal A in like a geographic market B. Let's do proposal C in a different domain, like same geographic market, and let's get some budget and let's do it. This is way more complicated when you have to. It's kind of an open heart surgery now. But it's not optional. You have to do it anyway.
How do you deal with? I think of some of the biggest objections within that are often the systems they already have in place that provide challenges to innovation in general, right? Yeah. You know, the ERP being a significant one, even if you're on modern, one part of your company's on a modern stack, another big part of your company's on a very unmodern stack. Like, how do you kind of work through some of that?
Yeah. 20 years ago, we would have believed, okay, let's do everything like in a modern way or in a future-proof way, and let's rebuild everything. Many companies tried it, especially tried to build everything around microservices or so. But to be honest, Boris, my co-founder, usually uses a sentence. He never met like an IT manager, like who after like a successful relaunch project is coming back to you and saying, "Hey, Boris, that was such fun. Let's do it again."
Let's do it again.
It's always painful, and even like in setups where everybody's like on the same side, there's no hiccup between like vendors and SIs and the customers. So even then, there's like so much stuff like in IT projects which you cannot predict. So the only way to manage this is to make those projects smaller, right? So like let's say to cut those projects in a way where like the longest timeline is like 3 months until you see success. And this is also something where you need like very, very smart and strong product managers, like people that understand IT and business and to accept that you cannot replace the ERP system. Most likely not within the next 5 years, but you can start like building around, and you can start like pulling stuff out. You can start like building your middleware and interfaces. But the successful, experienced people have learned that you need to reduce like hiccup risk. And the more systems you're touching, the more people that are involved, the longer the timeline is, the bigger is the risk of something is of a clusterfuck, to be very honest. And it's not about that people don't want to do it and are like anti-change. It's like it's way too complex, and the more people are involved in a project, the more communication streams you have. And I always like use one example which I found so eye-opening when I was still working at the Otto Group, this mail order company. And then there was like a time where the company decided, okay, let's get rid of our old e-com ERP backend. Like it was based on Intershop and lots of custom code. Now we want to do it right. And there was one guy called Udo who was doing requirement management. He went from team to team to get like all the requirements they would need for their domain. So I was responsible for the mobile commerce domain. Even 2005, the Otto shop was doing like 2 or 3 million euros a year in mobile commerce on Nokia screens, right? So it was really, really interesting. And then Udo came to us and did like this requirement list and Florian, Alex, so what's your requirements, blah, 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 blah. And we gave it to them, and we wanted to be like the companies in Japan, because there was iMode was back then, was like the status quo of mobile commerce. 1 year later, Udo came back, and in this year, there was like the launch of the iPhone in 2008, right? Like mobile commerce was like really changing. And then Udo came back and said, okay, Florian, Alex, I met with all the teams now. I have now my full list. I want to do just a quick check if everything is still in the right place, if like your requirements are still correct. And then we said, Udo, like everything changed. Nothing of what we wanted to do. And I still believe he's doing this like for 50 years now. Like
he's still doing requirements.
And it's like, it's just not possible. And he was a super nice guy and a
funny.
smart one too. It's just not possible.
Yeah, that's so true. Where do you see architecture decisions in this process? I know you guys have made some pretty significant choices about how you go to market, the platform and the architecture choices you guys have made.
Yeah.
How do you see that as part of this decision process?
So it depends who is doing the decision. The business, if the business is doing the decision, so actually they don't care what the architecture is. They just want it working. So if we do it like the Spryker composable way, using like Lego Technic building bricks, sounds nice, but eventually they want to have it work. In the early 2010 years, many CIOs tried this microservice architecture journey, and most of them, if not 99% of them, failed because it was just too complex to handle. The idea was good to separate like different like business domains from each other with like own databases and own protocols and own interfaces. But again, it's the same example like with Udo. This certain domain maybe it's not necessary like next year, but then you still have to this whole like kind of maintenance block for this kind of microservice. So and what we're seeing today is there was kind of a swung back from composable into like composed solutions. People don't want to take risks anymore. They've learned last 10 years that if they are contracting with like 10 different vendors on a PIM project or commerce project, then they have like 10 different ARs to pay, 10 different salespeople calling them who wants to earn more money next year. And it's obviously not really, it's nothing that's really helpful for our industry. So the approach we are taking is we are providing a rather composed solution, and you can rip out whatever you want and replace it with your part, but there's like a lot of power is built in already. I believed like 5 years ago that we should be opening up like even more into this kind of platform world where everything is connected via interfaces and API. But the team decided to have like more stuff built in, which is now something that is working out pretty well for us, because eventually you can go without in PIM and CMS, whatever. So you can use the basic stuff built in and save costs and time. But this seems to be kind of it's swinging back and forth. I'm pretty sure like in 3 years we are like fully back on the composable world, and then 3 years later it's back on the composed world. But eventually for the business, so it doesn't matter. And to be very honest, if we are going now to a trade show, like let's go to Shop Talks in Vegas or let's go to NRF. If you're like hiding the logo at a booth and you're just listening, it could be everything. It could be an email provider. It could be a commerce system. It could be a PIM provider. They're all telling you the same: API first, AI-driven innovation, B2C and B2B. It's all the same shit. So it's something where our industry really, really, really did not deliver. So everybody's like, so there's no differentiation available for an interested like CIO or business user. So even SAP and Microsoft are pitching total cost of ownership as a concept and time to market, where they want to be like really good. But it's like you cannot go to any vendor website and like find like even the tiniest bit of truth, because everybody's like copying from each other. And that's part of the problem, I believe. So finding out who's standing for what. And even I have like a tough time to understand what a certain partner in like the, I don't know, data governance space is doing. Even when I like downloading 10 white papers, trying to understand the whole website, I don't understand what problem is solved here and why him. It's like, and that's like, I think that's our industry. It's like, and that's a huge problem in our industry.
Yeah, I do this often when I walk around like a Shop Talk or our event, B2B Commerce World, and walk around and just and compare signs that everybody's using the same words in the same way and on other booths. It's kind of interesting. Let's talk specifically about Spryker. Talk to me about what Spryker does. Let's talk about first in the kind of especially the manufacturing distribution world. Like, what type of companies do you guys focus on serving?
Yeah, obviously companies that do have kind of a transactional business model that want to sell something. But it doesn't matter if they sell a certain product or service or if they want to build a marketplace. So if you want to build a marketplace for services in the construction space, for example, so then Spryker is definitely one of your one or two picks, one of the one or two only picks you have in the industry. So we just have been recognized as leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for this kind of vision. We are leading most of the use cases Gartner has in their vendor assessment, and that is those use cases in the Gartner Magic Quadrant are now focused a lot like in B2B. So it's not about like selling products that are sitting on a shelf anymore. It's what we are seeing is there's way more demand for our self-service portal where existing customers can pick stuff where they need like a spare part, for example, where customers can pick a service as a product. Hey, I want to have this thing repaired next week. Please give me like 3 quotes from garage services close by that can do it and that are certified with the right spare part. So it's a very different way. It's usually not finding new customers online. It was finding new customers online like 5-6 years ago. Now it's like serving existing customers way more efficient and better, being integrated more in the customers like product pipeline, and that's where we are helping most. So whenever there's a use case where you believe, okay, that is too complex to solve with our ERP system, it's not just setting up an online shop like which you could do with even B2B cases within Shopify today, when there's like individual workflow, different types of customers, complex pricing matrices. That's where we are strong, and that's actually where our team can help you to deliver the right thing.
Do you guys typically do the services yourselves, or do you work with partners?
No, it's like it's 95% partner-led motion.
Okay.
But it's an interesting thing you're naming it. What we're seeing, and this is definitely something our industry needs to discuss, the usually little triangle between like vendor, SI, and customer is not working perfectly anymore, because many customers learned that they don't want to work with two different parties, because then parties are usually blame each other. The vendor was not honest about like product capability. The vendor is like blaming the SI. This was like on the project level was not delivered the right way. And therefore we are finding more and more customers that are approaching us and saying, hey, Spryker, cool solution, cool people, but I don't want to have an SI involved. Do whatever you want to do, but we want your quote on the services side. This is definitely not scalable. From a vendor perspective, we cannot scale if we do all the projects ourselves. But what we should listen to is, why are customers saying this? They're obviously not happy how it went the last like 10 years. And if we are looking back and how much like customer success involvement we had in those projects, yes, there's a couple of hiccups in those projects, because on the SI side, we had the same problem like on the vendor side, no specialization. So many SI said we can do it. We can do B2C, we can do B2B, we can do construction, we can do automotive, we can do retail, we can do furniture, we can do fashion. And within those different industry, we have solutions in commerce from 5 different commerce vendors. We have solutions in PIM from 5 different. So they wanted to do it all, plus consultancy. So no specialization at all. So, and we see more success on the SI side with specialized SIs, like specialized B2B SIs, for example. But I don't have a solution here, but it's definitely something our industry needs to manage better. This whole triangle, because going forward there can only be this kind of triangle. You need vendors doing product, you need SIs doing the project, you need customers. But customers, from what I've learned last like 2 or 3 years, are not happy with the triangle anymore. Not happy the way how our industry was using this kind of triangle. So we don't want to do projects ourselves. That doesn't make sense from a financing perspective.
You know, in the distribution world, there's this concept of vendor managed inventory, VMI, you know, kind of there's some vending applications, and then actually managing inventory at the location of a customer. As you were saying that, this idea of vendor managed commerce comes to mind. So you still need that. You still need the triangle, like you said.
Yeah.
You've got all 3 parties, but how do you closer aligned strategy and relationships and technology and then services with the customer. I think that's a really interesting point. How are you guys thinking about AI? So we've watched Shopify, put out their MCP offering. Commerce Tools did something similar, not at the same level. As you kind of think about agents shopping and MCP and things like that, how are you guys kind of thinking about AI or with your customers?
So we are doing whatever is needed by our customers, and some customers need like better tools to like manage data, like inventory management stuff, and then we are usually like connecting either to AI providers that are doing this stuff or opening up our data room for the existing LLMs. We are not developing the own LLM. I don't believe like there's like too much value in that. So the stuff I've seen so far. So I've like my perspective on this usually the AI tools that we're seeing today are optimizing the existing value chain. They're saying, okay, you have like a fucked up like inventory management. Let's like use an AI tool to make it better. In the next AI generation of like businesses that are like driven by AI, you most likely don't need this AI tool anymore, because the way how you're like importing product data or inventory management or how you're doing inventory management don't require an AI tool that is like cleaning up data. So right now we are finding a lot of tools that are like working on the existing value chain, but very, very little tool that are like focusing on the new value chain, which is also like coming in B2B. Like from a platform perspective, we believe we need to be open for as many relevant tools as there are out there. From a strategic perspective, we want to be the single point of truth, because the system that holds the data, for this system, it doesn't matter what kind of AI tool is using this kind of data, because eventually it will be increased in value in the system. So, and second point is, if we are very, very honest about like customer feedback, like missing AI tools was not on the top 10 priority list. So, and as AI interested I am myself, I'm using all this kind of stuff all the time, and like I'm really bullishing. I'm annoying my colleagues with it, like every day. That's not what we are getting as a feedback from like customer service. And I think the customers are eventually the ones that are like paying our invoices. Therefore, we should do what they want and not what we find cool.
I think there's a lack of fundamentals in the B2B world, not because of not trying, but because it's so complex. Things like product content. Is such an incredibly hard problem to solve. Really, very few companies or anybody's really solved this ability to get product content from manufacturer to distributor, to display it online, to differentiate it, to make sure it's filled out, to get fill rates. It's such like, that's just one of many kind of fundamental things. And there are very few companies in the world that have actually figured out how to do that. And do that efficiently at some decent level of cost. And so then when we think about AI, it's like, well, we've got these fundamental things to figure out first before we get there. I completely agree with your approach there.
Yeah, and I just give you an example in B2C. So in Europe, I was involved in like many discussions around like Shein versus old e-commerce models. And Shein is, I know it's like deprioritizing US right now, but they have a very, very interesting way of like finding relevant products for you, producing them, shipping them to you. But especially the feed, how this selection was tailored for you, how this feed was built was very interesting. If you're like talking to Zalando or like Walmart today, they're saying, we are using AI in finding better, maybe even tailored headlines for our newsletter. And they say, but maybe the newsletter is not a channel where you have to create like demand anymore. You have to create an app where people are voluntarily logging in every day, spending like 20 minutes, and not finding better headlines for the newsletter. And I think that's a very good picture on how
that's
AI
true.
is deployed. Today, the newsletter is without any value in the future, but still people are buying headline optimizing AI tools for retail newsletter these days. And that's actually, when I'm listening to even competitors' AI announcement, that's what I'm seeing. I see like headline tools, not so much like tools that are like working on a new value chain. But it's like, again, so nobody knows what's coming. So maybe I'm wrong here, but I'm not getting this as a feedback from customers so far. And we have learned that we should do what our customers want.
Yeah. What are the type of, like, for the people out there that are kind of thinking through re-platforming or maybe platforming for the first time, which type of companies or problems should be the ones that are reaching out to Spryker?
Companies that are not happy with SAP, Microsoft Navision, ATG anymore should reach out, because those companies are sophisticated enough to run a decent organization. Usually they are like employing like people handling SAP updates without any value for customers or product or like the business model. People working on those problems definitely can work with Spryker. Whenever they have like a customer journey, a value chain where they do like new transactional business, new customers, existing customers, new geographies, existing geographies, new domains, existing domains, they can reach out. But like a good filter is, if you can afford your SAP Navision team, you definitely can afford Spryker.
Got it. Well, amazing conversation, Alex. Really appreciate it. Learning about you individually and the Spryker platform, and just your vast knowledge about this manufacturing distribution world. I appreciate you being on.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and thank you for also being like a fanboy of like B2B and construction and the stuff. We definitely should meet in person. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Absolutely.